even get started, let me take a moment to say a big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this episode. Our dependence on the internet has been rapidly increasing, that's no secret. The internet is how we stream our favorite shows and programming, it's how we keep in touch with our loved ones, and we even do most of our banking online these days. We'd like to think our information is safe, but with all the news about big companies having data leaks, we need to take every step possible to protect our personal data. Surfshark is a VPN service that protects your information by encrypting all the data that you send through the internet. This keeps prying eyes away and ensures that your sensitive data is always secure. If you're a global traveler like I am, you can access content that might be blocked in foreign countries. Not only is this good for people who want to keep up with their favorite shows, but it can also be a critical tool for those who live in countries that heavily censor or monitor its citizens. And right now, Surfshark has sweetened the deal with a special promo code for my YouTube viewers that offers 83% off. Just use the promo code FASTLIFE. I'll drop the link in the video descriptions down below, and the promo code will give you 3 free months of service, and as always, there's a 30-day, no-risk, money-back guarantee. Hey everybody, Craig Lieberman back at you with another episode, and if the banner in the background is any indication of where you are, you're probably guessing who I'm talking to. I'm talking to this guy, Sean Morris, the godfather of Skyline GT-Rs in North America. Prices of Skylines, there's a lot of young people and even people who have been around cars for a long time who sometimes assert that it's their speculation that the prices of these cars are going to come down in 2024 when the first R34s become exempt from a part of the 25-year rule.
I mean, the thing about the cars is that, you know, when I first started selling them, we started selling back in 2014. You know, we were selling cars in below $20,000 for GT-Rs, R32 GT-Rs. So, yeah, you know, we're buying them in Japan. Obviously, you know, we buy them at auction. We do some service and stuff to them. We ship them to the States, and we make profit. You know, we're a business. We're bringing them in. And there were guys who were looking at the stuff then and saying, oh, $20,000, you know, that's too high. You know, that's too much money. And so, and then, you know, now I'll wait till next year. I'll wait till the R33 comes out. I'll wait till the R34 comes out. And it's like every single, you know, year, the prices are increasing. You know, the guys from Japan, you know, sometimes the sellers over there are looking at the prices that we're selling them for here in the States, and, you know, they're just not, you know, not selling the cars at the less money. And then also, we end up with more and more people. The more people that know, the more people that know. Because, I mean, you will run into somebody every single day. You will run into somebody that says, oh, I didn't know you could buy these, or you didn't know you could still have these in the US, or these are illegal.
I ran into Chris Payne, another big GT-R fan.
Yeah, he's had his car since, I mean, I actually know him because he had R35 before he had the R32, but he was one of the first, you know, owners, one of the first guys to bring one in.
Yeah. So Chris said to me something really interesting in Cars and Coffee 2 weeks ago. He said, you know, when I bought my R32, I think he said it was, he paid like $12,000, which he thought at the time was way overpriced because, you know, other people were saying they could bring the car in for $8,000. Right. And he says, knowing what I know now, I should have bought every car that I could have got my hands on.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's 20/20,
of
right?
course.
I mean, you know, we could say, oh, I should have bought Amazon stock at the IPO. I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have, you know, bought crypto or, you know, Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin now has dropped, whatever, 40% in the last week. Right. But still, you know, if you would have bought it when it was, you know, $1 and now it's 30-something thousand, you know, I mean, you would have done pretty well.
But nobody has that kind of, you know, premonition or some kind of...
I mean, on cars, I mean, we can look and we can say some of the things that are in the future that we know, you know, there's only so many cars and there's enough people out there that the interest exists for those cars. So, you know, we go from people, you know, closer to your age and older, you know, where we're, you know, those guys who are, you know, looking at the Camaros and Mustangs and, you know, in the 60s, you know, muscle car era stuff. And they were, you know, they wanted those cars when they were in high school. And then, you know, when they had the means, the ability to be able to buy them when they're later, you know, they bought them. And then some of them realized, you know what, these cars aren't really that good. And so then they went and spent a whole lot of money modifying them, you know, and making them, you know, into something else. You know, it's all the stuff you see in Barrett Jackson and the Chip Fooses and all these other, you know, kind of crazy builds. And so, but the thing is, you know, like even those kinds of cars, so your iconic kind of like 69 red Camaro, you know, which is sort of an iconic kind of car, like something. So there's a whole lot of people out there in the world that, you know, are of that a little bit older generation. I'd say I'm Gen X, so a little bit, you know, the more the boomer generation that would want those cars. For me, like, I like them, but I wouldn't necessarily buy one to have one if it's the only thing that I can have. Yeah. And so we've got this generational shift, you know, that's happening.
You mentioned that the people of a certain age, whether they were Gen X or boomers or whatever, when they got to be a certain age, you know, they wanted that car in high school, the 69 Camaro. And when by the time they were able to afford it, they're probably in their 40s, and those cars were getting rare. If they couldn't get the 69 Camaro, they'd say, well, then I have to go to the next closest thing, maybe a 68 Camaro, even though the body style is completely different.
Maybe, you know, the thing is, there's always, like, even in those cars, there's the engine combinations, right. There's, you know, either manual transmission, there's automatics, you know, and there's all these other cars. And so somebody may say, you know, what they really wanted was a, you know, whatever, 396, you know, or SS, SSRS.
4-speed, right, all that.
Right. Yeah. And then that car wasn't available because there was only X number of those cars. And either they've got to pay all the money for it, or they've got to convert it, or they've got to do some other
Yenkos, Copo, Camaros, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's even, you know, that's way off into collector, you know, world, right? Those are, you know, ZL1s and stuff like that. That's like, you know, way out there. And so then the same on these kinds of, you know, these kinds of Skylines and stuff. You know, some people are going to say, well, the GTR isn't available. You know, the GTR price is too high, so then I'm going to get these other versions. And on the Skylines, there are other versions too. So, you know, you've got, so actually the R34s, you know, R34 GTSTs, basically GTS 25Ts and like the other types of them. And then also, you know, there's 4-doors and things like that. So those cars are obviously going to be a lot less money. Right. Not the same car, but still, to some people, that's, you know, they just want this, you know, they just want that. They just want that 69 Camaro, they want that R34, and even though they're not going to get a GTR, they're going to get a you know, 25 GT or something.
But here's the thing, here's what it's leading up to is the price of these cars is getting silly. Now, I asserted earlier before we got into the interview that it's like exotic cars to some extent, and I'm wondering if you agree with this. You know, like if the 360 Ferrari comes out, sells at this price, and then, you know, 3 or 4 years down the line, the prices have come down, and then the 430 gets introduced, right, and it's this price, and its prices start to go down after a while, and then if enough time passes, the 360 price starts to go up.
Right.
And then it starts, like Lamborghinis do this all the time. They fall off the map, right? My Diablo at one time, the first one I bought, went down as low as $98,000.
The Countach had you know, dropped relatively low, and then they started to bounce back up again. I mean, there was quite a period of time when Countachs were 70 grand or something, and then now it's like, you know, whatever, 250, 300, 400.
Horrible car.
Horrible car. They're not a great car.
They're horrible. It's not a great car.
Matt seems to like his. Matt Farah likes his car, and I'm like, man, it is a, you know, because when I was 16, you know, we were my dad's business. We were exporting cars to Japan. We had Lamborghinis, we had Countachs, and the same. I was every, you know, so I was you know, in high school in the 90s, and that we had, you know, had the posters on the wall.
Of course.
And they were great to look at, very, you know, interestingly styled. Oh man, they were awful to try to back into a warehouse like this and try to park and try to do all the things that you're going to do.
Try driving it across the country.
Sitting in there, you know, but again, like, all of those things don't necessarily matter to price. And it's the same when some people try to argue, well, the Skyline's only 280 horsepower. And it's like, that's not why somebody's getting that car. Yeah, you can buy a new Camry with 305 horsepower, but that's not the reason that somebody's going for that car. It's a much more like emotional, you know, purchase. And so, and that part of it is really hard for some people to understand, right? I mean, there's always going to be those guys out there that say, you know, why is somebody paying this much money for a comic book or a toy or, you know, whatever it is, this thing that has some certain amount of value. I mean, why are these Pokemon cards worth $100,000?
Why is an unopened video game worth $100,000 when it was a shit video game back then? It's a shit video game now. But it's
if somebody wants it and they want to buy it,
exactly,
and they have the money to be able to purchase it, then that's where we're going to end up. And that's the thing about these cars and about these things. And the thing is that, you know, if there wasn't a desire for them, then the price would be nothing. Right. The price would be whatever it is for scrap metal or whatever. Right.
The prices have been going up on these cars, right?
Right.
So
everything is going up. Actually, right now it's a really weird time for used cars, and actually even for new cars, because especially right at this very moment, there's odd stuff because of COVID, because there's chip shortages. There's no new cars. New car production has been slowed down, which means that, you know, in order for places like dealerships, new car stores and stuff to be able to survive, they need to sell cars. They need to buy cars to sell cars. And it's a weird thing. If there's a limited amount of inventory of used cars, and there's two guys that want those used cars, and this guy will pay $10 more than this guy, then this guy will pay $20 more than that guy, and then this guy will pay $30 more than that guy, and this guy will pay $50, you know, and it just kind of keeps going back and forth until you reach a point where, you know, they both want the same car.
I just saw an article in the paper a couple of weeks ago. It said Hertz can't buy new cars because there's no new cars to buy. They have to buy used cars for rental cars.
Right.
This is May of 2021, right?
Right.
And so this is some scary shit. Skyline GT, the R35, my buddy just sold his for like he asked us $68,000 for the car. 62 he sold it for. An auctioneer put it up for like $72,000. He got that and sold it to another guy who put it on auction for $98,000 for a 2014 low-mile R35. I'm like, holy mother of God.
And you know, again, like, so overall prices, so it's Skyline prices, getting back to your original question, yes, they've gone up. The prices in Japan have gone up. You know, obviously now, these days, you know, a lot of people have access to auction. They can see what prices go for. They can see what cars go for.
Let's roll back the clock of time, the hands of time, if we will.
Sure.
2001, 2002, what were R34s selling for from auction? Do you have any recollection?
2001, so when they were still relatively new.
Yeah.
You know, it depended obviously on the condition and the mileage and stuff on the car, but they did, you know, when they were new, they were selling for, it was in the equivalent of like 60 to 70,000. And so then a used car, then a couple of year old car, would have been in the, if it's a really nice car, probably 40 down to, you know, in the 25 range. And they sort of stuck there. They didn't really go below about 25,000 unless it was really bad as far as GTRs go. All the way up until, you know, so you started to be able to, other countries would be able to import them when they turned 15 years old. So you're starting to look at the same in 2014 or so, somewhere in that range for some of the 2014 for some of those cars to go to places like Canada and that. So, but you know, all those markets are relatively small. So, you know, even when we're talking about cars and markets and all the rest of the world, we're talking 127 million people in Japan. So, you know, then to other countries, you know, the UK, 60 million in that range. You've got, you know, Australia, 27 million. New Zealand's like 4 million. You've got Canada, about the same, 27 million. So the thing is, you know, then you've got the US. You've got 330 million people. 35
million people just in California. Right. Just in California.
So then, you know, the thing is that you end up with, obviously, even if half the people in the US had absolutely no interest in it, it's still more people than in Japan. You know, and so, and obviously not everybody in Japan has an interest in Skylines or in blah, blah, blah. So, you know, it's just, you know, but when you start to run the numbers on things and you try to explain it to somebody like, you know, yeah, the US market has the ability to consume everything that they made.
So,
could.
Demand is high and supply is low. What happened? The other thing is, there weren't a lot of R34 GT-Rs made, 11,000 and change of cars. Right. You and I think we're on the same page. We feel like about 20% have been lost through attrition. You know, crashes, turned into race cars, stored in private collections, destroyed in natural disasters because some of these cars, floods, transport, tsunamis, right? All the earthquakes. So that leaves 9,000 cars-ish to satisfy the remnants of global demand, and more people around the world have been introduced to the GTR through any number of means, social media, movies, video games, and so forth and whatnot. So now when the floodgates open in the United States with pent-up demand in 2024, I do not understand the logic of any person who looks at this and say, well, because they're suddenly going to be available, they're going to be cheaper than they ever were. Not when you have this pent-up demand. It just defies the laws of supply and demand.
It's still, you know, it's always kind of a strange thing, because again, so I started to be able to import R32 GT-Rs to the US under show or display in 2012, in December 2012. So actually September 2012. So, you know, now of course there's only 560 total R32 GT-R Nismos, but you know, relatively speaking, there was a small amount of people that actually took that opportunity. And you know, I was in Road and Track magazine, I was out there, I did GT channel, did a bunch of stuff like that. And I said, hey, if you want a car, these are available under show or display. Now, of course, you could only drive it 2,500 miles a year, and you know, if it's over 21, it's EPA exempt. But the truth is that a lot of people either didn't know about it or whatever, because I didn't sell all 560 cars. You know, I sold about a dozen of them or so. But still, you know, I mean, I ran ads on eBay. You know, I was also feeling the market out a little for 2014. Mm-hmm. So, and I wanted to see like where people were on prices and things like that then. But, you know, again, you had the ability to buy the cars then, and people didn't take that. And so then even now, like, we're giving people the ability, if they want, to buy and store an R34 in Japan. We're doing that. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, hey, we have these cars and here it is. And you're gonna see basically in that time, I mean, I don't know what the market will bear, but you know, the prices keep going up and up.
So let's talk about that. So 2024.
Yep.
Let's pretend it's June of 2024. Yep. And these cars are now, in the early production cars have been out for 6 months, right?
So this is pretty much all of the cars, because you know, the first couple of months of those cars, they pretty much was all of them. And that first year, they sold the most out of all of the cars. I forget exactly what the numbers were, but I want to say they sold 6,000 or 7,000 the first year, and then it was like 1,000 each year after. Okay,
so we're in June 2024. Somebody's gonna call you up and say, hey Sean, I'm ready to buy an R34 GT-R. It doesn't have to be an M-spec nerd, it doesn't have to be a V-spec, I just want an R34 GT-R.
If you would have asked me this a few years ago, I would have said it would be about 100 grand based on what they were then. You know, they were selling for, you know, 60, 70 grand, something like that. I figured, you know, it was going to go up, but not crazy. I mean, since then, though, the demand has gotten more and more, and people are looking at some of these other cars. I mean, it's going to be 200.
200 grand. So, and then
an old Nissan?
For an old, well, yeah, okay, but like I said, it's an emotional purchase. It's like, you know, maybe you weren't Pamela Lee's first husband, but the second guy in line is okay. Right?
You know, the thing is, like, so there's going to be people out there that are in Japan that just don't want to sell the cars that they have. There are cars that are just not available to buy. And you would have to give them a number to make their PP rise in order for them to sell it.
And have to be a really ridiculous number.
It's not, you know, for some people it's unfathomable sort of number. For other people it's cheap.
Yep, sure. We know a few of those guys. We just write any check for an R34. Yeah.
So I mean, we've got customers now. You know, we've got several customers with more than 5 R34s each.
There you go. So that's a passion for them. It's a collector, like any other collector. A guy collects Trans Ams or Camaros or GTOs or whatever, and he wants the best of the best of the best. So he's got one base, an M-spec nerd, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Totally get that. But for the aspirational young people, the people who are, you know, teens or late 20s or even 30s, where they're a little more established in life, they have to realize that acquiring one of these cars is going to be expensive. Yeah. And you're going to be fighting against a lot of other people. And like you said, there are people who have these cars in private collections that they won't sell unless you really get them excited about a number. Right. And then you're buying on emotion. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that it's not a way to get a good deal.
I would really like a 959.
Sure.
An F40.
Sure. Who wouldn't?
But they won't sell them to me for, you know, $25,000.
Right.
Why
so
not? I mean, because to me, I'm an enthusiast and I want to buy those cars at this number. But you know what? There's a whole hell of a lot of other people out there that would pay a lot more than that, than what I would offer. And so then, again, I like those cars, but that's not a realistic number, you know? And so, yeah, I dig the 959. It's a really cool.
What are they going for these days?
More than $1 million.
I have to think.
Something. I mean, the same, they were 360 when they were new, and they dropped into the 200s. So, but, you know, it's a really cool car.
Yeah.
It's got really, really cool stuff.
Yeah,
and obviously, a current 911 turbo is much more of a car.
That's where I was going to go next. There are better cars for the same amount of money that you have your eye on.
Yep.
Same thing with an R34. There are a lot better cars than an R34, R33, R32, or an R35 for the money, or maybe a little bit more, or even in some cases a little bit less.
But if I had the choice, I would take the 959.
Because that's the thing that you wanted. Yes, of course.
Is the car.
That's it.
You know, so if I have the money to spend, I want that, not a new Pagani or whatever the hell. You know, like, I don't care. You know, that doesn't do anything for me. I'd rather have that car. I
would rather have a Pagani St. Car, but that's just me. But yeah, I remember I had my Lamborghini Countach poster and I had a Porsche 959 poster. Those are the two main posters on my wall. I get it, totally get it. So
I mean, and these are more realistic goals. These are a more realistic car. And the prices are still, I mean, it's still obtainable for an R32 GTR. R33 GTR is an obtainable car. It's not cheap, the same as a Supra. Supra is not, you know, necessarily a cheap car. And obviously there's different versions and different things, automatics and non-turbo cars and things like that. And then, you know, hey, maybe you just, you know, you're like, oh, well, an SC300 is the same car underneath. And,
sure.
And you know, and then, hey, if that's what floats your boat, if that's what makes you happy, you know, cool, that's fine, you know. And so, yeah, those cars are worth, you know, nothing or, you know, very little.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, a Supra is always going to be the Supra.
It's just a thing.
You know,
the left-hand drive cars are in the six figures for anything halfway decent. Right. And the right-hand drive cars, now it's hard to find one anything less than, you know, high 50s, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it depends on obviously engine and condition and all the rest of the stuff. But yeah.
All right. So with all that, there are some cars, there's R34s that are already here legally. The Motor X cars. We think there were about 14-ish.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, I was at Motor X for a couple of years, and so then, you know, obviously I had all the chassis numbers of the cars that I did when I was there. But there was, when I did leave, so when I left in 2002 till they shut down in 2006, I mean, it was 4 years. And I did get a list from Hero before they were done of like all the cars that were kind of in progress. And so, but there was a few that kind of slipped through or kind of, you know, not really known or not taken account to. So there's about 120 total cars, R32, 33, 34. And so then some people ask me, what about an R32, Motor X R32, is it any added value? Probably right now, not really. You know, nobody's really looking at it. It's not really. And honestly, the prices are for a regular R32 are pretty good. 33, there was one that just sold on Bring a Trailer for $65,000 for a Motor X car. So, and then R34s, because there's so few, they bring a lot of money. And I've sold most of the ones that have come up, and I'm actively always looking for the ones that are out there, and I know of the ones that are out there, and I've sold some of them multiple times. So I've sold it to somebody, and then I've had offers come in, and I've gone back to the guy that we sold it to and said, would you sell it for this? And you know, when it's, you know, $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 and he paid, it might be interesting enough for him to sell it, you know. And so, like anything, you know, or maybe he's, you know, they're looking at other cars, or, you know, midnight purple cars and things like that, or, you know. So to buy one right now, I mean, you're getting closer to $500,000 than far from it. So, you know, so I mean, you know, less, more, you know, I mean, obviously, but it's gotten really weird the last year and a bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, where I bought some a few years ago compared to now, it's just, you know, again, and you end up with, like, I know of pretty much all the cars that are out there. And so then, you know, I talk to the owners and I talk to guys who want to buy, and the guys who, you know, you talk to the owner and say, you know, how much do you want? Go back, you know, and either they have an answer or don't have an answer, or the guy who wants to buy one says, I will offer this amount of money. So we offer that amount of money. Does it make the, and like I said, for the longest time, a lot of the guys who own them, just, they didn't need or didn't want to sell them.
Yeah, and they know that if they ever want to get that car back, they're going to have to pay more than they just sold it for.
Yeah, and I mean, some people, like anything, some people are done with it. You get to a point with the car and you're over.
Had my fun, yeah.
I've had my fun. I've done my thing, and I'm over that. So, but it's a weird spot. It's a very weird.
There are these importers, these people who bring these cars in from wherever, and they're selling them online, which are not federally legal. And of course, I've explained to viewers in several videos that just because you can get a license plate in a state where the DMV people are fucking stupid does not make that car federally legal. And federal trumps state.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not calling out any names. People who are in the business know who they are, and that's academic. But what we're really talking about here, when you bring these cars in and you sell them, and you sell a good number of cars, you're not just taking them in, giving them a detail, and just turning them loose, right? So talk about some of the process that you go through when these cars come in.
Well, I mean, Top Rank is, in Japan and in the U.S., and so then in Japan we have a pretty big facility over there. We buy a lot of cars, we sell a lot of cars, and so we do have over there we have a mechanic. Sato, who worked at Nissan Prince for about 20 years. He has R32s of his own. And so he'll go through our cars like they're, like a dealership, and so then say, hey, replace, because, again, the cars that are getting sold at auction are probably, somebody had and now they decided to sell or whatever. And, generally speaking, not always going to be, your most maintained or whatever kind of car. And so, and also it's easier to do the service that they need over there before it gets here. So the kinds of things like, R32 GT-Rs, it's the, one of the big ones is like the upper control arm mounting point, and the actual arm itself, they wear out over time, and so then you get some clunkiness and stuff in them. And just things like that, ball joints and Hicus ball joints and all these other kinds of things under the cars. And so, we do at least a couple of grand worth of surface, plus, all the fluids and all of everything else, make sure, oftentimes timing belts and all those kinds of things. If we don't know, we generally do it, unless we, like anything, there's always going to be those cars where, some cars we're going to spend a lot of money on, and then if it's maybe a little bit less expensive car, there's some that we'll skip some things and just make some decisions sometimes when it gets here. So, and then obviously we got to ship it to the States. We got to do all those kinds of things, clear customs, and then when we get it here, evaluate the cars and make sure that we try to give people the best cars we can. Have them here in stock. You can come have a look at them, or non-COVID times, it was much easier. But, in the meanwhile, try to have the best 25-year-old car possible. So, some people have an illusion about what a 25-year-old car is or isn't. Some people are easy to deal with, some people a little bit more difficult to deal with. You want to say, want to be as honest with people as possible, but it's also like even, brand new cars have issues.
Right. Well, I think it's the price point. Well, if I'm paying, $52,000 for this car, it better still have the plastic on the seats and the new car smell.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just not realistic.
But it's just, unfortunately, like I said, at that price point for that particular car, that might be the cheap one. And so there may be a much more expensive one that's out there. There may be that, like that,
sure,
that V-Spec 2, where it is pretty much a new car, but the same kind of thing. They are 25-year-old Japanese cars. So, generally speaking, pretty good. Generally speaking, okay. But I don't know if the alternator is going to go out next week.
Sure. An idea of what a customer who's looking for a decent condition R32 that's not a special model, sure, not one with like 20,000 kilometers, one with say
just a normal driver.
A normal driver, right, 150,000 kilometers or something like that.
So it's actually been sort of hard to get cars. It's been difficult, and especially the prices have been going up, and the prices in Japan for some stuff occasionally over the last few months have exceeded our prices here. And so the least expensive car I have that we're selling right now for R32 is about 47, 48. And we go up on R32 to about 65-ish. Although, you know, we have that one low kilometer car, which is going to be a lot more than that, but we haven't really talked about that much. Okay. But yeah, you're looking, you know, even in the regular market, you know, you're pretty hard pressed to find one, you know, much less than 40 that's a decent car. And like anything, you know, some people don't even know what a GTR is, and so they'll say, oh, I see one for 20 grand, and you're like, that's not a GTR, it's a GTST, you know, or it's even a non-turbo automatic, you know, blah blah blah. So but GTRs, good cars, decent cars are good money. And R33s, I mean, on the low end, you know, in the 60 to 65,000. So like that Motor X car is probably trading hands about where the market should be. And we go up from there. I mean, the most expensive R33 we have right now is 85,000. And then obviously R34s, we are, you know, selling people R34s. So M-Spec Nerf in Japan, Midnight Purples, the last Midnight Purples that sold over 200,000. So, and I think somebody just sold one for over 300,000 for Midnight Purple. And those cars just aren't out there. They don't exist.
They don't exist.
They're not available. We're looking, they're not available. And so it's not even there are some out there at X number, they're just not any out there. And so it gets back to almost that same point with the Motor X cars, where you go to the guys who have them and say, would you sell it for this much money? If I have a customer who says, I must have a Midnight Purple car, I say, well, I know some guys with them. How much do you want to pay? And you've got to, you know, that's where you end up.
$1. How much do I want to pay? I want to pay $1.
Well, guess what?
You're not getting one.
I would just hang up the phone on you because you know, you're wasting your time and my time.
Exactly.
But, you know, if you have a number in mind, then we can, you know, search that out.
What about cars like M-Spec Ners or other special editions, Z-Tunes or whatever else?
Yeah. So I mean, so we had clients that were looking for 400R. So, you know, there's about the exact number is sort of unknown, but, you know, anywhere from about 40 to 44 400Rs, and they're a special version of the R33. And so we put some feelers out there, and there's some cars out in the world, and they all came back 7 figures. So, you know, I wasn't expecting quite that much for them, but that's when we asked, that's where we landed. And so then, you know, I'm hesitant to think about where a Z-Tune might fall. I mean, I was offered a Z-Tune 10 years ago for, you know, $365 or something.
And you laughed or choked? Which one?
No, I choked because I was like, wow, that's a stupid amount of money. But I mean, right now, exactly, I would buy it in a second because, you know, basically, because, you know, that car the same, it's like it's going to be whatever somebody wants to buy, because there's only so many of those things out there in the world, and somebody who wants that car wants that car. And while you may say, well, you know, you can do a CRS, which is basically like a Z-Tune, but, you know, but it's a built by Nismo still, you know, but on a current and with some other upgraded parts, but it's still not that one of those 19 cars. And there's always going to be that guy out there that's, you know, going to say, well, I want one of those 19 cars. And there's going to be another guy that says, no, a CRS is going to be great. It's going to be all the stuff that is, and these are the reasons why I want that one over this one, or I can buy, you know, these 2 cars instead of that. So, but yeah, I mean, the 400R stuff is interesting.
$1 million.
More than, we had several, and so basically, at least 3, so 3 of the 40. So, and again, you know, when you're actively looking for stuff, you know, you think I would be able to find more than that, but that's
$1 million GT-Rs. Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah.
But this is the golden age, man. You know, and every year there's probably 1 less or 2 less or who knows? We just don't know. It's just crazy. This is an emotional purchase for sure. But you know, if you want it, it's like art. I mean, somebody pays $30 million for a Van Gogh or a Rembrandt or whatever. You know, you could probably create the same thing in Photoshop, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Right. Yeah,
it's not. It's just not.
Get into that art world where people are paying, $200 million for a painting. I mean,
they're not making any more of them.
It's a you know, to somebody like me, like, I mean, think of everything else I could do with that money. But then the guy who has that money, he has that money, so
he's got everything.
Right. So
you know,
it's a really strange. You know, it gets back to that $100 in your bank account, $1,000 in your bank account, where you fall on the frame.
And this is the sad part for me, because I remember being a kid. My family wasn't rich. I mean, I had to pay my own car payment at 17 years old and all that kind of stuff. And my parents didn't give a shit about cars, right? So I knew I was not getting a brand new Ferrari for my 16th birthday and all that kind of stuff. And I know so many kids who are on, Instagram and YouTube that make comments and they want one of these cars, a Supra or a GT-R, any iteration, lots of, like there are R34s, of course, but they would take any iteration. But the reality is that if they're 25 years old and they're not already set on a path to financial security, then they're way behind the 8 ball, and the likeliness of those kind of people getting their hands on one of those cars is getting slimmer by the day, And
until maybe they're 40.
Yeah.
Right. If they're, I mean, maybe they have something come up, maybe, whatever it is, I mean, like I said, there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, you can see out there in the world, there are definitely ways to make money, whether it be, obviously computer-related things, or crypto, or even stock
medical,
market,
being an entrepreneur, lawyers. Yeah, that's tough work. But a lot of other people are just kind of cruising around aimlessly through life, saying, "I want a GT-R," and they're really doing nothing but sitting on the couch and playing Gran Turismo all day.
Right. Yeah.
And those people are just, unless they get motivated. But it's sad, because it's hard to look at these people who are clearly passionate, would do anything to own one, except in some cases get off their ass. And so, but the cost is going to keep going up, and as evidenced by everybody who I've talked to has said the same thing. These prices are not going to go down now, unless it's 1,000 years from now and they dig one up as a fossil. Then it'll be worth less, but you won't be there, so it won't matter.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's taken a while for even like, some of that brass era stuff to come down in price, but I mean, we're talking, 40 years or something, so maybe in another 40 years, or maybe, I mean, even if, even if you started to say, well, gasoline is going to go away, or there's going to be a lot less gasoline, and blah, 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 and of course, yes, there is. But that just means that there's going to be less of your normal pedestrian kind of cars. Mm-hmm. There's going to be, of course, less gas-powered SUVs. Nobody's going to really care about those things. Nobody's going to really care about your run-of-the-mill, Sentras and Altimas and Corollas and stuff like that, right? Unless it's a
special edition GR or something.
Right, but now we're looking at some of those Corollas, the AE86s and stuff, and they're going for stupid money. Yeah. And that was just a nothing car. But so they're the same. But so your run-of-the-mill cars are just always going to be run-of-the-mill, and yeah, sure, maybe if there's less gas, everything's electric or whatever it might be. But the special stuff is still going to be special. And every year, like I said, there's going to be less and less and less. There's going to be either stuff that's just not available, stuff that's been crashed, stuff that's burned, stuff that's, whatever, being taken off the market for whatever reason. And there's going to be one or two more guys that are out there that want it. And so for every year, every day, every month, every 10 years, every decade, that, there's going to be more people that want this particular thing. If one more, two more, 10 more, then it just gets into, them paying what they're going to pay.
Yeah, it's because it has value to them.
It has value to them.
I mean, so
if you're buying something at auction, if you're on eBay trying to buy something, Craig, if you look at whatever it is, if it's something that evokes some emotion to you, G.I. Joe, blah, 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 or whatever, right? You're like, oh, I used to have one of those and I really want it. Well, it should be $5. But you know what? You can pay $500 for it because you can.
Right.
Is it worth $500?
Not to most people.
But to you, if you want it and that's what it costs, and somebody's bidding, and I bid 501, are you going to bid 502?
Sure, if it's a
right.
GI,
so,
if it's the GI Joe with the Kung Fu grip still in the box, I'm paying 500 for that fucking thing.
But you see, I mean, and again, it's sort of a complicated thing for some people to understand, right? So if that's what you want and you want it, yeah, in the box, you still want it like it was brand new, like you got it because your parents didn't buy it for you because you were a bad kid.
In other words, don't whine about the prices because there are people paying that and more. And no matter what price that goes up there, there's always going to be somebody who's going to pay more for that particular vehicle.
And if not, then it will drop.
Right, and if the world generally agrees that this car is worth nothing, then the prices will start to come down. Supers are not worth nothing. GTRs are not worth nothing. All these collectible cars are worth a lot to a lot of people. Right. Supply and demand, economics 101. It's the way of civilization, man, and that's just the way it's going to be. So complaining about it, it's not going to bring the prices down. It's just not. There you have it, the full rundown on GTR prices now and what we should expect in the future. I want to say thanks to Sean Morris of Top Rank Importers for being our guest. And here's how to reach them if you're interested in buying a car or asking questions. They also have a great website that covers most of the questions you could ever possibly have. Here's that address. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, and as usual, please support my sponsors.